Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I have a first impressions to do for you today. I apologize if bugs fly on my hands, it's real buggy today. Anyway, this is the Benchmade Mini Freek. Some would call it the Benchmade Super Mini Freek. This Mini Freek is special. The Freek, or Mini Freek rather, is designated as the 565. That's their internal number at Benchmade for it. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but just tiniest little spot on the blade, it does say 565. Now this is the 565-1. Dash 1, if you're familiar with the Benchmade 940, means that we have carbon fiber scales on this knife and an S90V blade. So S90V is a massive improvement over S30V. It's 60 better, right? S90V is one of my favorite blade steels, and I am pumped that it is available on here. Carbon fiber is one of my favorite handle material scales, so I am handle scale materials, I think is what I meant to say. Anyways, I'm pumped that this knife now exists in this configuration, because the regular Mini Freek with the black and gray, like kind of rubbery, weird textured handle scales and the S30V blade was not a knife that I had, frankly, any interest in buying. But now they got me, especially with how much I have loved the Super Freek as of late. I decided, as soon as I saw that this was coming, that I was going to be getting one. And then as soon as I saw one available, I jumped on it. Now, the lucky thing is, the first one I saw available happened to be at River's Edge Cutlery, which is who I would have chosen to buy from anyways. So I got one of these as quickly as I possibly could, and I have been absolutely digging it. This one is marked first production because it is a first production one. Benchmade used to, on all of their first production knives, number them, from what I understand. This is my first production Benchmade, so I've never owned one that's been stamped first production and been numbered. Frankly, I don't really think that adds to the value, so I don't care that now it just frankly has less writing on it, which I might even prefer. I don't like a lot of billboarding, that little inscription of first production. Doesn't really bother me. If it was much more, it might, so I'm fine with that. The finish on this blade is fantastic. It looks really, really good. The finish on the carbon fiber looks really, really good. So let's walk through a little bit about how I'm feeling about this knife so far. This is not the full review, that is to come. I generally do a first impressions within the first day and a half of owning a knife. I've had so much gear to be filming and reviewing and giving pocket time to, and etc. over the past few days, that I think I've actually had this for like 2.5 days now. So I'm a little bit behind, bear with me. I've got a ton of gear to shoot, and I have a lot more coming. So my videos might be going up in batches here for the next few days. Anyway, this knife has been in my pocket ever since I got it. The great thing about it is that with the size, my intention for this knife is to carry it as a secondary. So I haven't had anything else that's been demanding pocket time that is secondary size and weight and specs. So this has gotten all of my back pocket or waistband or fifth pocket time. I guess I haven't put it in a fifth pocket yet. I haven't been wearing jeans. It's stupid hot now. But this knife goes awesome in my back left pocket, and it fits really well in my waistband. The first day that I carried it, I did it with the factory clip on it, or the original factory clip, and then I decided, like I knew I was going to all along, that I was going to put the bug out mini deep carry clip on it. I'm waiting for 2 mini deep carry clips to come from Benchmade that I ordered from them directly. They just charge $5 for them. If you call them and tell them you want one of their mini deep carry clips, it's $5 plus tax. So I've got 2 in the mail. In the meantime, I poached this one from my bug out. I would have poached the one from my bailout, but my Super Freek poached that one. So now when those 2 new clips arrive, I have to put clips back onto my bailout and bug out. But this actually looks really cool. It came from the Ranger Green bug out, so it's like the gray finish instead of black finish. And I kind of think I might leave this on here because it looks really cool with the gray instead of black, the way it contrasts with the carbon. I'm really, really digging it. But yeah, this knife was good in pocket without the mini deep carry clip, but it's better in pocket with that deep carry clip. In my opinion, Benchmade should be sending this knife with that clip. I get it on some of their bigger ones that they don't send the deep carry clip, because I feel like a lot of people's preferences, I shouldn't say a lot, there are still some out there who prefer to not have deep carry on those larger knives. For me, I want deep carry on all the things from Benchmade. Their mini deep carry clip is one of my favorite deep carry clips that comes from anyone's factory. So I wish that they'd at least just like send one in the box with it, so you'd have the option, or I don't know. This knife in this size and configuration, I don't know why someone would not want it to be deep carry. Being this small package, I feel like it's kind of the philosophy of this knife is better suited to a deep carry clip. But no harm, no foul. I've got one on there now. They're easy enough to swap. It's not a big deal, and they're pretty cheap to snag from Benchmade if you just want to buy one. So, anywho, this knife I think looks phenomenal. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous knife. Well done carbon fiber. Just has some wow factor behind it. It really does. The depth of this carbon looks great. There's no voids anywhere. It feels very lightweight. I like that it's what would be considered dry carbon or matte carbon. Instead of being glossy, it's got this really nice matte finish to it. You can see on the sides of the material the kind of cross cuts where you've got these wavy woven layers. It just through and through looks really, really good to me. I dig it quite a bit. Much like the full-size Freek or the bug out or the bailout, we've got a semi liner inside. It's actually just a very small kind of a tab of a liner that just takes up this portion of the knife so that the axis lock can ride on some steel liners, and so that the washers can ride on steel instead of against the carbon directly. And this knife is really light. This knife doesn't feel overly thin. It still fills my hand really well. And so it doesn't feel like unsubstantial like a bug out tends to with how thin it is, but it feels really, really light in this setup. It's got a great blade stock thickness. The handle material, like I said, it's shaped really well to fit my hand and not feel like as small of a knife as it really is. This knife in hand feels super capable, and the amount of blade length is actually really reasonable. I've thoroughly enjoyed using this knife for all of the little EDC tasks that I have asked of it so far. And I've purposely been finding stuff to cut with it, and it's just, I've cut quite a bit of cardboard. I've opened plenty of packages, toys for my daughter, all kinds of stuff, and it's just, it excels. This S90V, like I mentioned at the very beginning, is finished incredibly well. It's got this like kind of like when Spyderco does their mirrored stone washing, although this certainly isn't mirrored. It's like a nice kind of high shine satin that's then stone washed, and the way that stone washing comes through looks really good. I'm not generally a big fan of stone washing. I typically prefer satin to stone washed, especially if it's like acid stone washed. That's just not usually my thing. There are exceptions, of course, but this blade finish is one of my favorites that I've seen from Benchmade. I think it looks great. I assume it'll hide wear well. So far, I haven't had any wear show up on it. I've just wiped this knife down after every use, and it's looking great. I haven't done anything to the edge, no stropping, no sharpening, nothing, and I shouldn't have to have by now. It's S90V, so it should still be perfect with everything I've done with it, but the relieving news is that it is still perfect. I know Benchmade can sometimes get a little wacky with the job they do on grinds, burning up edges, and sometimes with heat treat itself, but from what I understand, I've never really heard any negative press about their S90V. I have about their M4, their 3V, a few other blade steels, but from what I understand, they pretty typically get S90V right. So I dig it on here. I think for this size of knife in this application, S90V is an ideal steel. This isn't a steel that I'm going to be asking a lot of toughness from, and S90V is not a very tough steel, but it's reasonably corrosion resistant, and it's excellent at edge retention. So I really, really dig that about it. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, so far my first impressions are just really, really strong on it, especially because I swapped the clip. I dig it quite a bit in this configuration. I think it looks great. And yeah, it's really working for me. I think in comparison to the Super Freek as well, it's different enough that it doesn't feel like I've got two of the same knife in my collection. It's kind of like Para 3 and PM2. The size is different enough, but I also, with the PM2 and Para 3, I use them differently. And so I have a Para 3 in Maximet, It's an edge retention focused steel that's not focused on being super tough, and it's not crazy corrosion resistant, but for me that steel is what works and what I pick. Whereas the PM2 is a little bit more of a bruiser. Mine is in 10V. That's the one that I picked as my forever user in that platform, and it's kind of the same on these. I've got S90V here on the smaller, lighter little brother, and then the bigger, more bruiser sized one is in M4, which is a great tough steel with awesome edge retention. And yeah, it's a great steel for a bigger knife and the way that I would use the Super Freek. So I think as much as I had heard some talk of we wish that they had given us just a smaller Super Freek instead of going S90V carbon fiber, I think I disagree. I think this works better at being a small, like, secondary knife, the way that I intend to use it. I prefer this to if they had done more of that G10 with the multicolored pattern in it and more M4 that was coated. I wouldn't like that as much for this size as I do this configuration. I think it really, really works well, and I love what it does to the weight of the knife. I love that it makes it classier in a way. Like, this knife would be totally at home if you wore it in slacks to some kind of fancy occasion, and this is what you pulled out with this gorgeous carbon fiber with the nice little pop of red, but without being like vibrant and loud all over. It's just really, really nice, and it feels much fancier than the Super Freek does because of this material selection and the finishing that's on it. One thing I'll say as well that I've heard a lot of people be skeptical about before, just by seeing the knife in pictures, was that the edges would be really kind of harsh. I don't find them to be harsh at all. Could they be like scalloped and really overly rounded? Sure, they could be more round if they really wanted them to be, but they have the corners knocked off of them. It's not like just a 90-degree angle there, and in most places is actually quite chamfered or scalloped or whatever you want to call it. It's really just where these two cuts are that the edge gets a little more abrupt, but in hand, it doesn't feel harsh to me at all. The insides as well, these edges here that run along the inside of the scales also feel knocked down and smooth. There's nothing sharp or grabby on this knife. It feels really, really good. We've got the same style jimping that we have on the Super Freek. This kind of on the liners internally, a little bit here that doesn't stick proud above the scales, and then a little bit of jimping here on that thumb ramp as well. And that jimping to me is so unaggressive that it doesn't bother me one bit. It feels nice. It does lock my finger in just a little bit more than that thumb ramp would without it, but it's not trying to hurt me either. It's not trying to saw my finger off, which sometimes Benchmade does on jimping, as do other companies. But Benchmade with their, what was it, the Contigo I think I tried out, that was bad. Anyway, I think this knife really makes sense. It's interesting seeing the commentary on Instagram and on the internet in general, Facebook groups, etc., where people talk about upcoming releases and knives as they come out and try to give their 2 cents on them. And I'm guilty of it as well. Don't get me wrong. I jump into conversations all the time and give my opinion on knives that I haven't held yet. And I saw a lot of people excited for this, me being one of them. And I saw a few people who were just like, nobody asked for that. Why make it in those materials? Why not do something different that they haven't done before? Blah, blah, blah. And I disagree. I just feel like this formula works really well for what this particular knife is. I still don't have much experience with the 940. I've handled them before, but I've never owned one. I've never really used one. So I'm going to be borrowing one from a buddy here soon. It actually is in the mail now, so you'll see that within a couple of days that I'll be borrowing and using. But if I were to buy a 940, I would buy it in this configuration. And I think this knife kind of fits a really similar role to the 940, at least for me, and the way that I would use either of them. They're lightweight, small, pocket-friendly EDC knives. This knife in this size is not a knife that I want to take outdoors and beat on. I don't need it to be micarta and M4 or anything bruiser-ish like that. I don't need it to be tactical. This knife looks way more classy than it does tactical to me. It's not a gentleman's knife. This is still an EDC knife, but it works super well. One thing I'll say as well, I didn't do a video of it this time, but this knife came out of the box with a less than favorable action, as I have found is very common at Benchmade. It was nowhere near as stiff as my Super Freek. My Super Freek was unacceptably stiff to me. This one was mostly just stiff on closure. I was able to flick it out just fine, but on closure, it was getting kind of caught up here. So all I did was the tiniest little pivot adjustment, very, very minor, and I dripped some KPL in there without even disassembling it. Just dripped it down, kind of shook it in, and called it good, just like that. And now this action is everything I want out of a Benchmade action with no blade play. So I totally dig it. It's coming along great. And I'm gonna have a full review soon, but I guess those are my first thoughts. I've got a lot more experiences to pack in with this knife, although I've already been using it as much as I can, and I've been really, really enjoying it. So the good news is that I have not been let down at all by this knife. I'm really, really liking it, and I imagine my review is going to end up positive, but time will tell. There's still a few more days before I go ahead and film that full review, and I'll be packing in some more use and more pocket time. Up until then, I'll try carrying it in a couple of different ways. I may do it as a lightweight primary carry instead of just using it as a secondary. So we'll see. I'll have more to come on this one. But thanks for checking it out with me. This is the Mini Freek -1. I don't know if there's a nickname for this knife yet. There probably should be, because the Super Freek it got its own persona. This is called the Mini Freek, and another Mini Freek exists, but beyond calling it the -1, I don't know. S90V carbon fiber Mini Freek is too much of a mouthful. Somebody let me know if there's a nickname, because I'd like to shorten that up. But yeah, the Mini Freek -1, as I'm calling it for now, is great so far. I'm really digging it. My first impressions are very solid. If this is a knife you're considering and you're comfortable buying based off of my first impressions and not a full review, I would say don't hesitate if you see them in stock somewhere, because I know they're really hard to find right now. It's great. But if you prefer to wait for my full review, that'll be up in a few days as well. So this has been fun. Thanks for checking it out with me. I appreciate all of those of you who watch, those of you who subscribe, those who comment, those who like, my Patreon patrons, especially thank you guys. Anybody who's bought a t-shirt from Teespring, anybody who's bought one of my stickers, those who follow me on Instagram, all of you guys. I'm having so much fun doing this, creeping up on 1K, giveaway coming soon. So thanks to everybody who's been here for the ride and who is still strapped in. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon.